What started out in a one-room classroom, early American days, has transitioned to something unlike anything else. Education today has made leaps and bounds to end up where they are. Why, you may ask? Well, that's what we're here to discover. Born in 384 BC, Aristotle debated what true happiness was. What he discovered is that we will never find one cut-in-stone education system. That foundation, that landmark statement, has driven our education system in ways that we could have never imagined. And his philosophical viewpoints continue to assist us every single day in creating a system that will work best for everyone. Thousands of different systems, with thousands of different educators and different mindsets. Aristotle once said, presumably, however, to say that happiness is the chief good seems a platitude and a clear amount of what is still desired. The platitude of this statement is exactly what we're going to discuss. The overuse of the word happiness creates a figment in many societies' minds of what happiness should be. Saying that happiness is the, quote, chief good, for many, assume that this means money, nice cars, and homes, and a beautiful family. This, though, is not necessarily the chief good for all, and thus creates a dissatisfied society, especially in our education system. For me, though, what this means is that we need to continually evolve our system for each student's individual desires and needs. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that we need to get rid of gen eds or topics that we personally believe as a society are very beneficial to the grand total education system. However, what this does mean is that we need to focus on what each generation seems to need. Oftentimes, this can be viewed in the Cold War era when our country focused on science as a main aspect of education because we were in the race to the moon, we were in a nuclear war, we wanted to ensure that our society was best protected. And, well, what does that come down to? It comes down to teaching our students in the early ages how to best benefit society. In that time, like I said, it was science. Today, it seems to be moving in a more computerized era. We need to start rotating our second languages from possibly Spanish or Mandarin to computer programming, or aspects of that nature to ensure that we are best prepared for the future that lies ahead of most American students at this time. Looking at this next diagram, I personally believe is very important to our education system. What you can see is a multitude of different paths, all leading to one goal. That is how our education system needs to be based. We need to understand that students are going to, take a step to the left, turn to the right, take 2 steps forward, and that's just part of life. That's part of growing up, and we as educators need to understand that to better suit each individual student, we should take them down their paths, knowing that eventually each student is going to end up at their goal, the large arrow where our system as a society comes together as one. Looking at a real-life example or a use case shows the different paths. Now, this is a perfect example of the customer paying bill. There are multiple paths to achieve this goal, such as paying through the telephone, mail, or in person, the type of payment, by check, cash. All these are different aspects of how to achieve one single goal through multiple means. The same thing can be applied to getting a college graduate. You can take the following classes, maybe different than the person to the left or right of them. However, the end result is a higher educated individual. Analyzing this debate further, we need to discuss Socrates and Plato. They decided to create almost a ranking system of what should be important in education. As quoted from Socrates, the following: answering to these 4 questions, assume these 4 affections occurring in the soul, intellection, or reason for the highest understanding, for the second belief, for the third, and for the last. Picture thinking or conjecture, and arrange them in a proportion as their objects partake of truth and reality. Now, this is from obviously the allegory of the cave. However, further analyzing, their education standpoint had a great point that we still analyze today. What is important in today's education? Personally, I think the following are important. Physical education classes teach us to push ourselves in ways that we never thought we could ever push ourselves. What this does is build a mindset of success for ourselves. Now, analyzing this next image, if an opportunity doesn't knock, build a door. This mindset is what needs to be taught, although it's not in a single class. It's simply in a philosophical mindset of how education needs to be phrased. We need to continue teaching students to work for themselves, to put their full effort into everything they do, and that comes with inspiring them on a daily basis. With this, though, there are multiple ways to think, such as thinking nationally or thinking locally. Personally, I believe that thinking locally is the most responsible way to lead our nation in the correct direction. As Dewey said, traditional education did not have to face this problem. It could systematically dodge this responsibility. The school environment of desks, blackboards, and a small schoolyard was supposed to suffice. There was no demand that the teacher should become intimately acquainted with the condition of the local community, physically, historically, economically, and occupationally, etc., in order to use them as educational resources. Now, what this means is that in 1938, when Dewey stated the following, he saw the practicality of thinking locally. You are able to inspire your students by knowing their economic status, knowing more so on how they think, how they're going to frame their own issues. And doing so will allow you to better educate your students. This means you understand their economic, their family life, their possible futures, and all of these situations, while also understanding your school budget, which goes along with all of the topics listed before. Now, just because you can understand how a student may frame their issues and how their mindset may work, does not mean that you may be an effective teacher. As Palmer said, in workshops on teaching and learning, I invite faculty to look at their own classroom practice through the lens of a paradox. I ask each teacher to write a brief description of two recent moments in teaching. A moment when things were going so well that you knew you were born to teach, and a moment when things were going so poorly that you wished you had never been born. You may be asking yourself, well, why is this necessarily needed as a teacher? I'm given a curriculum, I followed it to the T, that student just couldn't be taught. Well, this is important because education isn't simply following a curriculum, which many areas in our nation currently do. It's about finding paths that we discussed earlier that will inspire each student to their end goal. End goals can, of course, be different. Thinking locally and analyzing what the main end goal for students are is an integral part to the success of education within our nation. As Grubb and Lazarson discussed, while thinking locally, you begin to analyze the jobs and occupations that students may achieve in the long run. This vocationalism is what they discussed in the following quote. This kind of problem is generally avoided with the fourth version of vocationalism, or required schooling, where a particular kind of schooling is an absolute requirement to enter an occupation. This can be from anywhere between a degree in computer engineering or becoming an emergency medical technician and simply needing to take an 8-week course on that. Each form of vocationalism is different, and analyzing your own students and being able to better prepare them for the worlds that they may face ahead is key to our nation continuing to be a very competitive, economically fronted nation, as well as a fully educated nation, ensuring that our unemployment rates stay as low as possible and that they simply become a thing of the past. What's important for us as a society to understand, though, is that government has an impact on everything and anything having to do with education. As Laborie said, in an important way, all three of these goals are political, in that they are all efforts to establish the purposes and functions of essential social institutions. But one major political difference amongst them is positional, with people in different positions adopting different perspectives on the purposes of education. The democratic equality goal arises from the citizen's social efficiency from the taxpayer and employer, and social mobility from the educational consumer. Further analyzing these facts, it's important for us to understand that our political leaders have a direct influence on our educational system. This, though, is not necessarily a bad thing, but something that we do need to understand in order for us to effectively set up our schools. We need to know that our economic status within our government does play a role in our budgeting and how much we're willing to spend on students. And with that in mind, we need to adjust and prepare for different situations, ensuring that our education system can thrive no matter what the politics are, no matter what the status of our nation is. and no matter what other outside factors are playing a role. The last and final point that I personally believe strongly in is analyzing our time spent in school. Constantly in the government, we're adjusting schedules and ways that we need to show up at work to ensure that we're going to be effective for our entire shifts. However, with school, we've kind of stuck at where we are for the past tens of years. However, as W.B. Du Bois said, the following year, the weekly meetings were continued, and 2 months were added to the original 3 months of school. The next year, 2 more months were added. The improvement has gone on until now these people have every year an 8 months of school. Now what this means is that our amount of time spent in school has not changed for a very long time. Do we need to reevaluate our vacation time, such as the common debate of year-long school? And topics similar to this, I have no issue with us continuing this debate and continuing to discover how we can best effectively capture the mind of a student, ensuring that they are going to be best taught and best absorb the information that we are attempting to instill in them. Now, as we wrap up, I want you to continue to picture this image, following those paths upwards towards the final goal of each student, analyzing each philosophical mindset and frame of thinking to get you to that final goal, that final outcome. And like I said, for each student can be different. So sit down, reflect, think of your own teaching habits, and think of the common American student, your student, and think of how you can best inspire and teach them. There, then, we will finally see an effective teaching mindset and effectively educated society. At this point, I'd like to thank you for listening and leave you with this final thought. Continue to push yourselves and question each and everything you do, as you never know when your path will take you in the right direction.